Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of Yellowjackets Season 2, Episode 4, Old Wounds. Before I jump into this review, please subscribe, share this video, whatever you can do. It's another competitive show to cover. I really appreciate any support I can get. I'm also trying to get a Rotten Tomatoes credential, so I'm trying to hit that 30K subs. I really appreciate it. It means so much to me. So jumping into this episode review, before we even jump into every character's storyline, I just want to say how amazing was this cover of the theme song No Return by Alanis Morissette herself. I actually thought it took an already great song, a great theme song, and made it even better because it just was more haunting with the vocals she was doing here. I actually think they should actually make this now the permanent version of the theme song. I think it just is incredible, and it will always be credited as great song made by the other artists who made it originally, but I really think they should use Alanis Morissette's version because holy cow, was that incredible. And I also think it was incredible the version that's played with the piano in the food court scene with Lottie later in the episode. Also amazing. So I know I'm fanboying here about the music, but I just absolutely loved it. I was blown away by it, and I'm not even like gassing that up. I really, really liked it. Both versions. I hope we hear more of both of them. So I actually want to start with everything going on with Ty and Van in both timelines. And then I want to go into everything with the past in general. And then we'll go into everybody's character story in the present day. But with just Ty and Van, it's a very important episode of their relationship. And starting with the past with them, it's interesting that Van now is just on a mission and going on these walks with Ty in her sleepwalking. And they find another tree that Ty is going to in her sleepwalking. And she's like, hey, let's just tell Lottie. And we see that Van is marking down on her little map all the trees they're finding with the symbols. But what's also crazy is she connects her map to Coach Ben and Nat's map, and that these markings, the spots they found, actually makes the symbol itself. Now, what is crazy to me is 2 weeks ago, there was a great theory on Reddit someone had about that the symbol is actually from this man we saw a vision of in the cabin last season, who people thought was a hunter, and that he's actually a surveyor, and that the symbol is a symbol he would use to survey the land. This is looking more and more like the case, and I think a Redditor cracked the code on this one, so props to them. But I think it's also really cool. It's a cool idea by the writers, and that would make sense of what the symbol is. And again, this show constantly plays with you because you don't know who to trust, you don't know who's lying, but you also don't know what's supernatural and what's not, if anything even is supernatural here. So maybe this symbol thing again is just something that was a land surveyor doing their job. It's very interesting. But Van wants to prove to Ty that her theory is right because there's one more spot that she's like, okay, if this maps out that this makes the symbol, all these trees, this tree should have a symbol right here, she points to on the map, and they go look for it. They don't find the tree with a symbol. They find, though, earth that is actually melting, like Nat and Travis had found, but a different spot. But what they really find is Javi. Now, in that big scene with Javi being back, Van says to everybody that Ty is the one who found Javi, and it's all connected with the symbols and Lottie. But Ty's the one who knew where he was. And she's like, something inside you is connected to all of this. So it's very interesting, but you also see kind of Van stretching the truth a little bit about how much Ty knew Javi was actually there. But I'll get into all the Javi stuff later in the review. But in the present day Ty story, we see that she was in Jessica Roberts' apartment looking around, and then she goes into a trance, and she basically ran out of gas in her car, wakes up, and she has Jessica Roberts' Yellowjackets folder. So Ty, not in a trance, found something that led her to want to go to Van and show her that Jessica Roberts had. So that's going to be important. Now, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me is Ty, we do see, has service on her phone. GPS is working, but she decides, in not a trance, to hitchhike, because why not? I mean, why didn't she just call an Uber? I thought that was weird. And also, why was she deciding to go with a mysterious man into this truck who has a pen of a naked woman? Very weird, and just to me seemed out of character for Ty to do that. It just didn't seem smart on her part. I didn't like that at all. I thought that was very weird. Like, the whole hitchhiking aspect of it felt very forced, and I don't know why. What's the payoff for coming off a truck to get to Vans? Why not just take an Uber? Maybe it just looks more How they wanted it to feel, I don't know. I just didn't like it. But I did like that she ends up at this while you were streaming store, which has VHSs. It literally sells VHSs. There's a VHS on the sign. And it's Van's store. I love this. And of course, I'm so excited to see Lauren Ambrose. And they did a good job keeping the scars accurate. It's also interesting. It is a VHS store because we see that the show is framed in a very VHS style with the opening credits. And again, with the transitions, they have a lot with Coach Ben and his flashbacks, but also just in the opening of the episodes, right? Like it just being staticky like a VHS. So it's going to be interesting how that connects to Van and her VHS store. I think there's got to be some connection there. And I'm really excited to see Ty and Van together, and it makes sense that they're reuniting in the real time, which we've all waited for. Halfway through the season, it's a good point to bring that reveal. Obviously, though, nowadays you can't really hide information like someone getting cast in the show as Big Van actress as Lauren Ambrose, and that there'd be an adult Van. I do wish there was some way that we didn't know this, and how cool of a shocker that would be to see adult Van. But that's just the way it goes today. Now let's go to the past timeline with just everybody and just go straight through this. Now remember, Shauna says that someone stole the bear meat, and Mari goes to blame Ben. Mari, man, is just on everybody. She is not a friendly person and puts blame on everybody else. Again, just setting up Mari to be eaten at some point. She's not a likable character and not nice to people she probably should be nice to, especially Misty. But take note that Javi's definitely the one who, because we know Javi's back, was eating the bear meat. And I want to say and give myself credit because people were giving me crap about this theory that maybe some chance it was Javi who pooped in the bucket. I'm going to say Javi definitely pooped in that bucket, and I was right. Even though it's not 100% confirmed, it has to be Javi. But back to Mari, too. She also not only gives Ben heat here, she also tells Nat it's her fault they're not getting the amount of food they should, and gives Lottie all the praise. It's just brutal. It's like, Mari, why don't you go and hunt? And saying that Nat should be doing Lottie's blessings. But you see, just interesting with the Lottie believers and that divide with the people who don't believe in Lottie, but the Lottie believers believe Lottie brought the birds last episode to them. And it's interesting, they're just eating these birds as bird soup. And Misty's like, if it's diseased, we would have gotten sick from eating them. I still don't count that out, though. That could be something that does happen to somebody here. But they bring up the birds and that she's the one who had the bear come to them and that they say Lottie provides. So Nat challenges Lottie to see who can bring more food here. I thought it was an interesting line by Misty, though. When she's laying out the rules of this, she says, we only have one gun, so maybe you can draw cards. That's important because we see an actual playing card in Lottie's story. So we'll get more to that with Lottie's story in the episode, but I wonder if this will be something that we'll see when they're deciding who's going to be put up as food, that they use playing cards in some sense to determine that. I also like we actually saw Shauna writing in her journal here. As a little visual detail I thought was nice to see. And Mari's hearing that dripping again. That still we haven't confirmed anyone else hearing it. They just are listening to her about it. But she brings Aquila to look into this, and Aquila finds a mouse, and she decides to keep it in her pocket as like a pet. So secrets are a bad idea when everybody's hungry around you, and especially if you can look at a mouse as something you could eat at this point in this desperation. So not looking good for Aquila here. I think this is just a terrible idea to be hiding any type of animal on people right now. Now with Lottie, she comes across this tree stump shrine we've seen in her visions, we saw in the woods last season, and she cuts her hand at it to make a blood offering. And we'll see her do some present day, which we'll get to a little later. But the past timeline causes her to bleed out a lot, and it's also freezing. She's also hungry, so this is just a case of like, okay, is this just visions happening because of that? But she sees Laura Lee playing the doll and necklace, and then she envisions going down a hatch. I just thought so much of Lost here and thought she was going to run to Desmond. But then she comes out of an elevator into a mall in this very, very deep vision. And again, I love how this version, this cover of No Return is drowned out at first. And then you hear it in the piano version during the scene in the food court, which was great. So I also love Misty's hair here. But you see, this is like a vision of her imagining what could have been for these girls and their life should be just being normal, eating in a food court together. And it's big with Laura Lee, who means the most to Lottie, and her guiding her to eat, guiding her to survive and stay warm, or she will die. And I'm going to get into this more with Lottie's present day storyline, which is next, but how this episode really leans towards Lottie's visions, maybe not so much being in truth or supernatural. Again, we still don't ever really know in this show, and I like that, but this would be the episode that is on that team against Supernatural, would be this episode. So in the cabin, Ben is reading the Magus, which Misty was reading in the finale last season. And he doesn't really read it, though. He kind of throws it away. And that means a lot because he's not into that stuff. Because that book, if you really look at the synopsis of that book, it's a young British graduate who is teaching English on a small Greek island. He becomes embroiled in the psychological illusions of a master trickster, which become increasingly dark and serious. So this literally is a story of Lottie at this point in the past timeline, which I think is very interesting. And we get a little mini, which I didn't expect, Ben flashback. I was like, okay. And it's interesting. You gotta love, they love toying with us. They had him standing in the apartment of his boyfriend. He has antlers behind his head, Ben. But we see Ben doesn't have this open, comfortable, happy life in the past and these memories like his boyfriend did in those pictures. That's really all the info we got there, but didn't go much anywhere else. It just felt kind of weird in the flow of the episode, but okay. But now the big thing is Nat finds the white moose from earlier in the season, and it's in the ice, and everyone runs like, yeah, let's go get the food. But of course, Mari's like, no assistance, there's rules. And that's like, oh my God, Mari, come on. But Misty tells Mari when Mari's like, I'm going to tell Lottie that you're breaking the rules. And Misty's like, tell her I don't want us to starve. This is just a good reminder of who Misty is. She usually goes with the more popular thing and just follows the lead, wants to fit in and be liked. So that's kind of her destination. It's not that she's this big spiritual believer or the other way around either. She's just kind of going with what advances her. And again, really, they makes her liked. So that's Misty. But they try to get this moose, and there's no luck here. This would have been huge for them. Like they said, that could have fed them for a long time. And this is just going to probably amp up the timeline now, again, of more decisions they're going to have to make. Are they going to get really hungry and want to eat a person again? They already got the taste for it now. But Lottie and Nat actually have a bonding moment, which is rare. They bond over the tub here, and that they both lost, and they shake hands and say good game. Now, I just want to say, when Javi does show up, I don't know, with Travis here, it was the actor's fault, or if it was the director, or a little bit of both, or the editor, but man, what a casual response to see your brother you've been crying over, obsessing over, show up.
Oh, hey, brother.
What was that? It's little things like that that drive me nuts sometimes in shows, but that was just so unbelievable to me. Like, it fell so flat. Like, what are we doing here? But it's interesting that Nat's in the background, like, oh my God, because now Travis is going to put two and two together and probably hate Nat that she lied about Javi. But this is huge too, because this really sets in, which a lot of people predicted, that Javi coming back was going to be the key for people to really believe in Lottie. Like, oh my God, Lottie was the one who said that Javi was still alive, and she was right, like Mari's saying, and it makes Nat look worse because she said Javi was dead. I love Misty goes, 3 cheers for Lottie, though. I thought that was great. Now let's go to present day Lottie, which was very, very interesting stuff, which I never really liked it. Again, a lot of heat I got also saying that there's a little grayer side to Lottie in present day, and maybe isn't the full Lottie we knew from the wilderness and where she goes. And it's looking like I'm right here, because present day Lottie actually goes to her shrink, but her normal doctor went on a sabbatical last minute thing that she didn't know about, by the way. So that was interesting too. Like, I don't know if he was scared off by his last session with Lottie or what, or he found something out about her. But the past 10 years, she's been going every 6 months. But this time she's coming 5 weeks earlier because she wants her meds upped because she's getting visions again. But it's important that she says it's the first time in decades, and that the way she reacts to them is she wants them to stop. Where in the wilderness, she's embracing them. This is a totally different Lottie. She's like, last time it became something different, something that can't happen again. So she's reflecting on it bad, and that's why I had said in my previous review when she had the blood in her hands, there is a guilt there, and something happened to people that she was supposed to protect in that wilderness, and she failed them. So it makes sense that present day Lottie, it'd flip. We don't know what the shock therapy, if she keeps doing that, what happens in this timeline after getting off of the plane, and that how much Lottie has changed from the Lottie we might see full Antler Queen Lottie or Vision Lottie at the end of the timeline in the wilderness. And what's so important is this psychiatrist is like, hey, maybe don't push them away. It might cause more. She's like, what do you think they're trying to tell you? This is obviously the worst thing you tell someone like Lottie. But she's like, nothing, because they're not real. Again, such a different tone in the Lottie we actually know. And I thought it was interesting because 2 episodes ago, her seeing that Laura Lee what happened with Travis, I really, like I said, thought she was telling most of the truth to Nat, but didn't tell the part about seeing Laura Lee and these visions taking over her again. So it might not be that Lottie's covering something crazy up of like murdering Travis. I think it's just she's changed now, but now we're seeing a story which I think is definitely more interesting than her just being this clearly bad person, that she did change in this timeline we haven't seen from being back to now in present day. And that we're seeing now, she's relapsing. And you see Lottie has these visions in her gratitude cards of this Queen of Hearts that we saw on the poster. And I'd mentioned the card line from Misty, but also, A, it's a queen, like the queen bee Lottie, but B, it also has the eyes blacked out like the man with no eyes. So this is going to be really important, that character and the connection to Lottie and everyone in the wilderness. And again, like I said, the card's probably determining outcome of who they're going to eat. And that's why it's so scarring for her to even see that. And you see, though, with present day Lottie with knife, like in the woods in the past, making that blood offering, but in a relapse fashion, because the way she's talking about it to this tree stump, like, can't this just be enough, please? Like, she doesn't want to do this anymore. But I love that they're doing this story for her. It just made it so much more interesting than her just being a evil, secretive guru. You know, I think this is a great turn, and it made me very interested in where this is going to go with Lottie and present day and how dangerous she can be now in this sense, in this relapsing sense of going back to these visions. But it just makes me really think that these visions aren't really visions, and I'm really down with that surveyor theory about the symbol. And how much did these visions get affected by Lottie being someone who is completely off of her meds, hungry, starving, and freezing? You know, it's interesting stuff. So I was really, really interested. This is my favorite Lottie present day storyline I've seen in the show yet. But on the other side of things, I was so right now about the Nat storyline. But we see that Nat is watching Lottie intently. And her plan, which is a very smart plan, is she wants time to bond with Lisa, she tells Lottie. But what she really wants is those keys from Lottie, because we see at the end of the episode really quickly, Nat's like looking at Lottie's office and has the keys to her office because it's on that keychain. But there's been a lot of contrived writing in the present day timeline in this show, and Lottie to trust Natalie with the keys chain there that has her keys to her office, I don't know, a little bit of a stretch. Like, I think they're making certain characters like dumber than they are in this timeline, like I said, with the tie and the hitchhiking, and here with Lottie giving the keys away. But what's good about the dialogue with Nat and Lisa in the car is that Lisa will say one thing that makes you actually trust Lottie, and then Nat will make a good point that makes you not trust Lottie and kind of call out the hypocrisy of what Lisa's saying. So again, it's interesting. You're kind of going back and forth, and I like that, of like who's really telling the truth of the situation. But Nat happens to be the right person in Lisa's life right now to give her hope, because Nat herself almost committed suicide, and she saw that, and Lisa's someone who struggled with suicidal tendencies. But we see that Lisa, to me, is a good person and someone Natalie should definitely be able to trust and get more info on. But we'll see how much Natalie, again, gets maybe pulled in a little bit at the end of the day by some of the stuff that seemed probably comforting her that Lisa was saying. But maybe she just sticks to playing Lottie and not trusting Lottie like she does with the keys. So we'll see, and her getting to Lottie's office will be interesting. But I just don't know how much screen time we needed with the Lisa story with her mom. I get what they were doing, and it makes sense for Nat's character, but just not the most compelling stuff here. I also think that translates to, I wasn't crazy about Misty's story this episode, but it's still interesting because Walter's saying all the right things to Misty, which makes her suspicious of him, especially because he listens to the same music that Misty's into. And he says, like, really things that will swoon her over, right? Like, he doesn't care if she's a Yellowjacket, just likes her for being the African Grey, who is a Reddit username. But the real elephant in the room with those two is the Adam case, which hasn't been talked about really yet between them. Because they're talking about what if he's just a Yellowjackets fan, obsessor like Adam was, that she can't trust, but she's still not, to protect herself as well, not bringing up that Adam case, which he still could be playing her to get info on that. We also learn Walter is a multi-millionaire, and he won a lawsuit where he was injured and he had a metal plate put in his head. And when she says, what is your deal? You know, it's interesting to see a Misty dealing with someone else who is like another Misty. And they plan they're going to surprise Lottie's group in the morning the next day, so they stay at a B&B. There's moments with Walter you can't trust, right? Like, he wanted one room really fast with Misty, and Misty was like, 2 rooms. It could be innocent, it could not be. It's interesting that Lottie's honey, though, is in their welcome baskets in their rooms. And you got this montage of similarity between the two of them. I thought it was funny they both put the face masks on, but it was interesting that Walter put a full face mask on and he looked like Hannibal Lecter. Oh my! I do not think that was some coincidence. And Hannibal Lecter eats people, so I'm just not still trusting Walter. But I hate with the inconsistency because I like this montage, but I feel like it missed the end because they had everything similar with them. But at the end, when they're both on the bed and they're looking at their phones and turning over, thinking about each other, Misty still has her face mask on, like a little bit. It would have been amazing if Walter also still had his face mask on. And it's just bizarre they didn't do that. I'm sure maybe they thought of the idea after when they filmed the other part. Who knows? But it just felt like a miss. But there's a song about angst playing behind them. So, you know, they're angst about each other, right? Like falling for each other. Can they trust each other? So we got to kind of see what goes on with those two. It's interesting, but again, I don't know if it's the most entertaining. Now, the Shauna present day storyline, like last week, I'm really liking all of a sudden. But this isn't a diss to this show specifically, but I do want to mention this. I've never gotten to mention this in reviews, but I am so over writers who write this way people talk, like Jeff does at the beginning of this episode, where he says, they know about the affair. And then she goes, who? The cops. I hate when they just write lines like that where someone says something where you obviously, as the listener in that kitchen, like Shauna was, wouldn't know what the hell they're talking about. And then you say the cops. This is a complete nitpick, but I'm just saying this because it just happens to be here and it reminded me. And I see so many shows and movies doing this. I just want people to stop doing this. Like the saying something that's out of nowhere and doesn't make sense to anybody around them and then they correct it. Just people don't talk like this. Why not just have Jeff say, the cops know about the affair? And why am I shouting? So Shauna sees Michelle, though, Callie's friend's mom, and this is how she's going to find out that Callie hasn't been staying there and is lying. And, you know, Shauna as a mom, too, is seeing that Callie lies like her, too, and that she's learning that from Shauna. But what I really like what they did with Callie and Shauna's storyline this episode is that Callie, at the end of the day, is more like Shauna than you think. She's truly Shauna's daughter. And Shauna finds the Adam ID in Callie's drawer, so she knows now at this point she has to talk about this, address this. And it was also interesting, they showed you through text that Callie was going to go on a date with Jay, the undercover cop, that night at 7, but decides not to. Which tells me I think she is someone Shauna can trust. But I love Shauna brings her where there is no service, right? So she can't make a phone call because Shauna is about to confess to murder to her daughter. And she actually gets Callie to mention the Adam ID herself. And Callie's like, I'm so over secrets. Did you kill that guy? Did Dad? And I love that Shauna naturally, by habit, starts lying at first. And she's like, oh, that's a lie too. And then fully comes clean. I'm happy. I've been saying this in reviews. I want to see the character growth in Shauna. Let's see Shauna not lying every other word. I think it just makes it more interesting now. And Callie's like, you killed an innocent person that didn't deserve to die. But Shauna's like, oh, come on. You know, your dad's not squeaky clean either. He was the blackmailer. And she's like, well, you're telling me now who started all this too? I mean, this is so traumatic for someone. Finding out your mom killed someone who was innocent and your dad started it all as a blackmailer. But I don't think it's so traumatic as we think for a Callie, because Callie is like Shauna. She can handle this stuff. I think Callie was actually relieved here to hear the truth from Shauna. And she looked happier at the end of this convo because when Shauna brings up they did horrible stuff in the wilderness, that was why he was choosing blackmail. She's like, can we save another day? And Callie's like accepting of this and is like, yeah, and looks relieved. But the thing Shauna says, like, you promise you won't tell anyone, so you're nervous because, again, we know she's talking to an undercover cop, and this is why Jeff freaks out when Shauna tells him that Callie knows everything. And Jeff says what a rational parent would say, like, you know, we have to shield and protect her. You made her an accomplice, which is so true because that's the whole messed up part of all this. But what do you do, right, if you're Shauna? Because you know your daughter knows something's up. You don't want to get caught, so you got to talk to her about it. Now, Cassie doesn't tell the full truth, though, to them because she says she's not been going to Alana's anymore, but even though she's being more truthful, though, so again, it's showing she's learning truth now from her mom and likes that and is doing it herself, but she doesn't mention Jay yet, so she didn't say the full truth of who she's been planning to go hang out with. But it's a good sign she skipped the date and stays in with Shauna. And she seems happy, like I said. So I actually do trust Callie right now, which I like because that's a little different than I think most people expected, including myself. And honestly, with this story, I'm getting Ozark vibes with the Shipmans here. That I think Callie, Jeff, and Shauna, they're setting up to actually work together now and do messed up stuff together. Because, again, I like they're leaning into Callie as Shauna's blood. You know, I think she's able to clearly show she can handle this and isn't freaking out with this information where most, I think, children would, finding out that their mom killed someone innocent, wouldn't know how to handle that and take that guilt and knowledge on. But she seems fine and better than she was. So I think they're going that direction, I think, which is very, very interesting and makes sense. But overall, I think this was a very solid episode. I'm giving it an 8.7, where I still think maybe just watching it entertainment value, the Nat present day and the Misty present day kind of felt like, to me, just dragging a bit, but necessary. But I still really liked most of this. I'm still thinking about that Alanis Morissette cover. Amazing. Really great to have her music in this episode. And I hope they keep the theme music as hers. And I really loved everything going on with Lottie's present day timeline. I found that so interesting and a good turn for it. I love to hear your guys' theories. I read every comment. I try to respond as many as I can. Please subscribe and please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more of me. And I'll see you next time.